Picture this for a second. You're sitting at your kitchen table on a quiet Sunday morning, coffee in one hand, phone in the other, and you open your investment account, maybe out of curiosity, maybe out of habit. And there it is, the number you've been chasing for decades, $2 million. $2 million. For a second, you just stare at it. You blink, maybe refresh the app like it might disappear if you don't check again. And then this quiet thought floats into your mind. Okay, I did it. I'm good now, right? I mean, that's the dream, isn't it? Work hard, save consistently, invest for 30 or 40 years, and eventually you reach that magical number where life kind of unlocks, where work becomes optional, where the stress fades, and the rest of your life finally begins. And for a long time, $2 million has felt like that number. It sounds enormous. It sounds like wealth. It sounds like freedom. But here's the slightly uncomfortable question that almost nobody asks out loud. What if it isn't enough? Not isn't enough in some dramatic, catastrophic way, but in a much quieter way. In the way where the math technically works, but the lifestyle you imagined doesn't. In the way where inflation slowly eats into things. In the way where unexpected expenses show up. In the way where retirement lasts 30 years instead of 15. Now, I spend way too much time thinking about money, and honestly about the strange psychology we all have around it. My name is Tim, and a big part of what I do is help people understand how wealth actually works in the real world, not just the nice, clean versions we see in headlines or financial calculators. And one thing I've noticed over and over again is that this idea of 2 million equals retirement is kind of like a financial myth we've collectively agreed to believe. Not because people are naive, but because it feels comforting. But today, I want to walk you through something interesting. Not scary, not depressing, just clarifying. Because once you actually understand what $2 million really means in retirement, how it works, where it breaks, and where people get surprised, you can make better decisions. You can avoid some painful mistakes. And most importantly, you can design a life where money quietly supports you, instead of quietly worrying you. So, let's talk about it.
There's something fascinating about humans. We love round numbers. Seriously. 100K salary, $1 million net worth, $2 million retirement. Something about those numbers just feels complete, like crossing a finish line. But the problem is that life doesn't really operate on neat, round numbers. Retirement isn't a finish line. It's more like the start of a very long road trip. And imagine planning a road trip like this. You calculate that your car can drive 400 miles on a full tank of gas. So you look at the map, see that your destination is roughly 400 miles away, and you think, perfect, one tank, done. But then, real life happens. Traffic, detours, air conditioning running. Maybe the road climbs uphill for 50 miles. Suddenly, that 400-mile estimate doesn't feel quite as comfortable. Retirement works the same way. When people say $2 million is enough, what they're usually referencing, whether they know it or not, is something called the 4% rule. And this rule comes from a famous retirement study that basically suggested this. If you withdraw 4% of your portfolio per year, your money should last about 30 years. So if you have $2 million, 4% equals $80,000 per year. At first glance, that sounds pretty good. $80K annually without working. Not bad. But then you start layering reality onto the situation. Taxes, healthcare, inflation, unexpected life events, and suddenly that $80K starts shrinking. Let's walk through that slowly, because this is where people get surprised. A lot of people picture retirement as this tax-free paradise. Like once you stop working, the IRS just kind of waves goodbye and wishes you a nice life. Unfortunately, that's not how it works. If your retirement savings are mostly in traditional retirement accounts, like 401ks or traditional IRAs, every withdrawal counts as taxable income. So let's say you withdraw that $80,000 per year. After federal taxes and possibly state taxes, depending on where you live, your take-home amount might look more like $60,000 to $65,000. And suddenly the psychological shift begins. Because $80K sounded comfortable, but $62K? That feels very different depending on your lifestyle. Now, to be fair, many retirees also have Social Security, maybe a pension, maybe some taxable investments. But the key point here is simple. Your retirement number isn't the number in your account, it's the number you can actually spend. And a lot of people don't realize the difference until they're already there.
Let me tell you a tiny story. A friend of mine recently showed me a receipt from the 1990s. It was from a diner. Breakfast, eggs, toast, coffee, bacon, the whole thing cost $3.25. $3. Today, that same breakfast might cost $12, maybe $15 depending on where you live. That's inflation. And inflation is sneaky because it doesn't show up all at once. It creeps in quietly over decades. If inflation averages 3% per year, something that costs $60,000 today will cost roughly $145,000 in 30 years. Let that sink in for a second. Your cost of living more than doubles. So when someone retires at 65 with $2 million and expects $80K per year, what they're really signing up for is this. Year 1, $80,000. Year 10, $107,000 needed. Year 20, $144,000 needed. Year 30, $193,000 needed. Now, ideally, your investments continue growing. But retirement portfolios are often more conservative, less risk, more stability, which means growth can slow down. And this is where longevity starts to matter. 30 years ago, retirement was shorter, a lot shorter. Someone might retire at 65 and statistically live another 12 to 15 years. But today, it's not unusual for someone to retire at 65 and live to 90 or 95. That's a 30-year retirement. And if you retire earlier, say 60, it could be 35 years. Think about that. You might spend more time in retirement than you did raising your kids, more time retired than you spent in college, early career, and starting your life combined. Which means your retirement savings aren't just a pile of money. They're essentially your personal pension system. They have to fund decades of living. And decades include things like market crashes, healthcare costs, helping family members, home repairs, life. This is the part people almost always underestimate: healthcare. According to multiple retirement studies, the average couple retiring today may spend $300,000 to $400,000 on healthcare during retirement, and that's with Medicare. People often assume Medicare means everything is covered, but in reality, you still have premiums, supplements, prescription drugs, dental, vision, long-term care risks. And here's the thing. Healthcare costs also grow faster than normal inflation, so the longer you live, the more unpredictable that number becomes. And ironically, the healthiest retirees, the ones who live the longest, are often the ones who need the largest retirement funds. Life has a sense of humor like that.
Okay, this concept sounds technical, but it's actually very simple and incredibly important. It's called sequence of returns risk. Here's the idea. Imagine two retirees. Both have $2 million, both withdraw $80K per year. Both average the same market return over 30 years. But one retiree experiences a market crash early in retirement, while the other experiences it later. The first retiree might run out of money. The second retiree might not. Same returns, different order. And that's because withdrawals during a downturn permanently damage the portfolio. This is why financial planners often say the first 5 to 10 years of retirement are the most critical. A bad market early on can change everything, which is another reason why the simple $2 million equals safe retirement idea can be misleading. Something interesting happens to many people when they approach retirement. They imagine slowing down, spending less, living simply, and sometimes that happens. But often, the opposite happens, because for the first time in decades, you finally have time. Time to travel, time to pursue hobbies, time to visit family, time to try things you never had time for before. And those things cost money. Flights, hotels, golf, boats, grandkids. Suddenly, retirement spending can actually be higher in the early years. Some people call this the go-go years, the phase where retirees are active, healthy, and eager to experience life, which is wonderful, but it also means the early years of retirement, the years where sequence risk matters most, are often the most expensive. Now, here's where things get really interesting, because $2 million might feel tight in one place and incredibly comfortable in another. Living in San Francisco, New York, Los Angeles, your cost of living might be enormous. Housing taxes alone could eat a large chunk of your retirement income. But move to a lower-cost area, suddenly the exact same portfolio feels luxurious. This is why financial planning isn't just about a number, it's about lifestyle design. Where you live, how you spend, what matters to you. Some retirees downsize homes, some move internationally, some split time between locations, and each decision dramatically changes how far your money goes.
Here's the honest answer. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. It depends on your spending, your taxes, your location, your health, your longevity, your investment strategy. For someone spending $50K per year in a low-cost area, $2 million could be extremely comfortable. For someone spending $120K in a major city, it might feel tight. And this is the part people often miss. Retirement success isn't determined by one number. It's determined by alignment. Alignment between money, lifestyle, expectations, and flexibility. The happiest retirees aren't always the richest. They're the ones who designed a life where their money quietly supports their priorities. So let's come back to that moment at the kitchen table. The coffee, the phone, the investment account showing $2 million. Because honestly, that's still an incredible achievement. Think about what it represents. Decades of discipline, thousands of small financial decisions, saving when it would have been easier to spend, investing when markets were scary, staying patient when progress felt slow. $2 million doesn't happen by accident, but retirement isn't just about reaching a number, it's about understanding what that number actually means. Because the real goal was never the money. The goal was freedom. Freedom to wake up without an alarm. Freedom to spend time with people you care about. Freedom to explore, travel, rest, or simply exist without financial anxiety constantly whispering in the background. And the interesting thing is, once you truly understand how retirement works, taxes, inflation, healthcare, market risk, the number becomes less mysterious, less magical, but also more manageable. You stop chasing some random target you saw online, and you start designing a plan around your life. Maybe $2 million is enough. Maybe your number is $1.5 million. Maybe it's $3 million. But the important thing is that it's your number, built around your real lifestyle and your real priorities. Not a headline, not a rule of thumb, just a thoughtful plan. And honestly, that level of clarity is worth more than any round number in a brokerage account. Because when you understand your financial life clearly, something subtle but powerful happens. You stop wondering if you're okay, and you start living like you are. And that is the real retirement.